Hey there, Wargamers. Justin from AMP Services, and today I'd like to talk with you guys about the Pathfinders, the unit that I think is the backbone of the Tau army. Now, for all you Tau players out there that might be running a combined arms detachment or even an allied detachment with your Tau, you may find that the fast attack selection from the book is a little bit crowded, particularly if you're using some of the Forge War models as well. You've got access to hazard suits, barracudas, and even the piranhas, as well as some of the flyers for the Tau. While those are really good choices, it's very difficult to choose between them and the Pathfinders sometimes, but the Pathfinders bring something to the table that those things do not. While those particular units may bring some type of extreme firepower, what the Pathfinders bring to the table is synergy. So what is it about the Pathfinders that makes them synergize so well with the rest of the Tau army? Well, what makes them synergize so well is their pulse carbines that have a marker light attached to them. So what the marker light allows the Pathfinders to do is to essentially fire a laser at a target that does no damage. For each successful hit, they apply a token that sits next to the target. These tokens can be spent on a variety of different abilities, but the two major ones are Pinpoint and Scour. So let's take a look at an example where marker lights can be particularly useful. Now, I've mentioned that they've got the special rule Pinpoint, essentially where Pathfinders mark a unit. The unit that fires afterwards can spend one marker light to increase their ballistic skill by 1. They can keep doing this with as many marker light tokens as there are. So in this particular case, we've got a flying hive tyrant, and towards the bottom left of the screen, I've got a set of hazard suits. For them to fire at this flying hive tyrant, I'm going to be rolling 6s to hit because of the snapshot special rule. He's a flyer. So I would fire at him first with my Pathfinders to see if I get any marks on him. If I get 1, maybe 2, I'm taking my hazard suits from ballistic skill 1 to ballistic skill 2 or 3. That's huge. We're going from rolling 6s to 5s or maybe 4s. Alright, so we've established that increasing the ballistic skill of a unit that's firing with the marker lights is pretty effective. What else can marker lights do? Well, marker lights have access to another ability called Scour. Now what this one does is when you spend 2 marks rather than 1, you can eliminate the cover save of the unit you're firing at. In this particular photo, we're looking at some of my stealth suits, and this is a unit that is specifically designed to utilize cover. If you were to fire at them with your marker lights, you got 2 marks, and you expended those marks with the next unit to fire, you could really cripple my stealth suits because you could take away their livelihood, their ability to negate your shots with their cover saves. Now, taking away cover saves for stealth suits is brutal, but they're not the only unit in the Warhammer universe that relies on it. You've also got, for example, Space Marine Scouts, or Tyranid players, like in this example, who put their monstrous creatures inside area terrain. So now that we know what Pinpoint and Scour mean for the marker lights, let's look at how we can utilize both of these together. In this particular photo, let's assume that I've hit one of the maul locks, the one in the area terrain, with 3 marker lights, so it's got 3 tokens on it. I want to take him out. I want to get rid of him so that he's not assaulting my battle suits next turn. So I can turn around with my hazard suits, and I can look at the maul lock and I can go, you know what? I don't want you to have that cover save from the area terrain. I can use 2 of those 3 marks. Boom, this cover save's gone. Well, now I'm looking at him and I'm like, you've got 1 more mark on you, and my ballistic skill is only a 3. Ballistic skill in Tau is pretty low for the most part. So I'm going to use that mark to up my ballistic skill to 4. So now, I'm taking away this cover save, and I've given my guys +1 of the ballistic skill. Now this effect is compounded by every marker light token that you've been able to place on the target. So let's recap one more time. The whole point of the Pathfinders in any Tau army is to increase the effectiveness of every other unit in the army. Those marker lights give the rest of your army a potential to take away cover saves and increase their ability to hit. This is brutal. So now that we know what the primary weapon for the Pathfinders does, their pulse carbine and marker lights, let's talk about what you can do to give them a little bit of an offensive edge, because you're pretty much never going to be firing your pulse carbines unless something's assaulting you. Now, Pathfinders have access to a couple of unique drones. I'm not going to talk about those right now because, me personally, I don't think they're particularly useful. What I will talk about, however, is one of their special weapons, the ion rifle. This particular weapon has a 30-inch range and 2 firing modes. The first mode is Strength 7, AP 4, and Rapid Fire. The second mode, Overcharge, is Range 30, Strength 8, AP 4, Heavy 1, Blasts, and Gets Hot. So what does this do for you? If you're running a 10-man unit of Pathfinders, 7 of those are going to be dedicated, synergetic models for your army, trying to mark things. Well, 3 of those models can give you some type of a punch. You can fire some high-strength shots into some type of monstrous creature or unit, or if you really need to lay some damage into a horde, you have the potential to fire a small blasting bullet at Strength 8 into the middle of a unit. Now, the caveat to that is this particular weapon does have the Gets Hot rule, so you could wound yourself in the process, but in my experience, taking these weapons is worth it. Tactical philosophy to take away from the Pathfinders is versatility. Here we've got a unit that synergizes well with the army, but by outfitting it with 3 ion rifles, it also has some degree of offensive capabilities to help give them a punch as well. So I have 2 more topics to discuss briefly about the Pathfinders before we conclude this video. The first thing is what not to do with the Pathfinders. In this particular photo you can see a unit of my breachers with a devilfish. This is here for reference only. If you are considering putting Pathfinders inside of a devilfish, don't. The primary function for your Pathfinders is to secure cover and fire marker lights every turn if able. If you're wanting to use them as some type of offensive capability, consider using the ion rifles. If you have some interest in using the devilfish to deploy a highly effective offensive unit, check out my video detailing the breacher squad utilizing my drive and dive technique. I want to reiterate, however, Pathfinders are not an offensive damage dealing unit. They are a synergizing unit first with a secondary weapon that gives them a little bit of an offensive versatility in your army. It almost goes without saying that your Pathfinders are probably going to be targeted first, and you can't fault your opponent for that. The Pathfinders are really easy to take out, and they synergize really well with your army, which makes them a really hot target to go after. This aspect brings me to my final point and my last suggestion for helping you utilize your Pathfinders effectively. Make sure you position to the best of your ability and utilize terrain when you have the opportunity. In this particular photo, I was not able to deploy inside of the terrain with my Pathfinders. That's not a big deal though, so long as it's close enough. They also have the Scout ability. What Scout allows you to do is redeploy up to your basic movement before the first turn of the game. For infantry, that's 6 inches, and you're not slowed by terrain. That allowed me to get inside this cover and use it to my advantage. The caveat to this is, however, most things that rely on cover come with a price. They have 4 armor saves generally. Pathfinders are no exception to this. So if you're facing off against Space Marines with drop pods and flamethrowers, or any type of artillery that ignores cover, expect casualties and try and position accordingly. Finally, if you did have the extra points, purchasing an Aegis defense line, maybe one of the new Tau terrain kits, or a bastion, or some type of fortification like that, might also be effective for your army, so keep those in mind. I'd like to give a quick shout out here to this guy Doug. The Tyranids you saw in this video were his, not mine. He's been gracious enough to let me use some of the photos of our previous games in my videos. Additionally, while I did not paint his Tyranids, I did work on some of his Sisters of Battle and some of his Skitarii models. So hopefully in some future videos you'll get to see some of his models facing off against mine. Alright guys, that wraps up my discussion for why I think the Pathfinders are the backbone for any good Tau army. If you enjoyed this, please take a moment to subscribe. Additionally, if you found this particularly useful and want to talk about it, please leave us a comment below. I'd love to start a discussion. If you haven't already, check us out on Facebook as well. You'll be able to stay up to date with what our studio is currently doing. Finally, while I didn't paint the Tyranids in this video, I did paint all the Tau. If you'd like, please check us out and request a quote. I'd really appreciate it. It's how I make a living, and I'd like to paint your models for you. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, happy wargaming.